The rain hammered down on Seoul like bullets from an angry sky. Petra Daniel pressed her phone against her ear, squinting through the sheets of water cascading down her face. Her scholarship interview had run 2 hours late, and now she was stranded in Gangnam at 11 p.m. with a dying phone and exactly 3001 to her name. The black sedan, she muttered to herself, reading the taxi app one more time before her screen flickered and died. License plate ending in 742. She spotted it. A sleek black car idling at the corner, its windows tinted so dark they looked like mirrors. She didn't hesitate. She yanked the door open and threw herself inside, sighing with relief as the warmth enveloped her. Thank God, she breathed, pushing her soaked braids from her face. I thought I was going to drown out there. Myeongdong, please. Near the university. Silence. Petra looked up, and her blood turned to ice. This was not a taxi. The interior was all black leather and chrome, reeking of money and danger. 2 massive men sat in the front seats, their necks thick as tree trunks, their eyes fixed on her through the rearview mirror with deadly intensity. But it was the man beside her who stopped her heart. He sat in the shadows like a king on his throne, his long legs crossed, his posture radiating power that made the air feel thin. His face was carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, lips pressed into a line so cold it burned. His eyes were the darkest she had ever seen, black as the suit he wore, black as the rain-soaked night outside. Those eyes pinned her in place like a butterfly on a board. Who are you? His voice was low, smooth, and absolutely terrifying. It reminded her of silk wrapped around a blade. Petra's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. One of the men in front reached into his jacket, and she saw the glint of metal. A gun. Her stomach dropped to her feet. I asked you a question. The man beside her leaned forward, and she caught his scent, something dark and expensive that made her dizzy. And I don't like repeating myself. I'm sorry. The words exploded from her lips. I made a mistake. I thought this was my taxi. My phone died and I couldn't see properly in the rain and I just saw a black car and I'm so sorry. Please don't kill me. I have a final exam on Monday and my grandmother will be devastated if I die before I become a doctor. The silence that followed was so thick she could taste it. Then, impossibly, the corner of the man's mouth twitched. Your grandmother, he repeated. Yes. She sold her goats to send me to Korea. All 12 of them. Do you know how much she loved those goats? The man stared at her for a long moment. Petra was certain she was about to die. She had survived growing up in Lagos, survived the impossible entrance exams, survived 6 months of culture shock in Seoul, and now she was going to be murdered by the most beautiful, terrifying man she had ever seen because she got into the wrong car. 12 goats, he said slowly. 12 goats, she confirmed, her voice cracking. He made a small gesture with his hand, and the man in front lowered his weapon. Petra nearly collapsed with relief. Myeongdong, you said? She nodded frantically. Drive. The car slid into motion, smooth as a predator through water. Petra pressed herself against the door, trying to make herself as small as possible. She didn't dare look at the man beside her, but she could feel his gaze on her like a physical weight. 20 agonizing minutes later, the car stopped near her dormitory. Petra fumbled for the door handle, desperate to escape. Wait. She froze. The man reached into his jacket. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the bullet. Instead, she felt something pressed into her hand. She opened her eyes to see a thick envelope. For the taxi fare you missed, he said. And buy yourself an umbrella. Before she could respond, he reached across her and pushed the door open. The proximity made her breath catch. For just a moment, their faces were inches apart, and she saw something flicker in those dark eyes. Something almost human. Go. And forget this ever happened. Petra ran. She didn't stop until she was inside her building, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Only then did she open the envelope. Inside was more money than she had ever seen in her life. Enough to pay her rent for 2 years. And a black business card with a single name embossed in silver. Kang Jae-hyun. If you are already hooked and want to see what happens next, do me a quick favor. Tap that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our stories. Trust me, this one is about to get intense. 3 weeks passed, and Petra tried to convince herself it had all been a dream. She returned the money to the university's lost and found with a made-up story about finding it on the street. She threw away the business card. She buried herself in her studies, determined to forget the dark-eyed stranger who haunted her dreams. But Seoul had other plans. It was a Tuesday evening when everything changed. Petra was walking home from her part-time job at a small restaurant, tired and aching, when she noticed the men following her. There were 3 of them, moving through the shadows like wolves stalking prey. Her heart rate spiked, but she kept her pace steady, her grandmother's voice echoing in her mind. Never let them see your fear. She turned down an alley, hoping to lose them. It was a mistake. The alley dead-ended at a brick wall. She spun around, but they were already there, blocking her exit. Their faces were hard, their eyes empty. One of them smiled, revealing a gold tooth that glinted in the dim light. "You're a hard woman to find," he said in Korean. "Our boss has been looking for you." "I think you have the wrong person," Petra said, backing up until her shoulders hit the wall. "I'm just a student. A student who got into Kang Jae-hyun's car." The man stepped closer. "A student who saw things she shouldn't have seen. Our boss wants to know what you know." "I don't know anything. I got into the wrong car. That's it." The man grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "Then you'll tell that to our boss yourself." Petra screamed and fought, but she was no match for 3 grown men. One of them clamped a hand over her mouth while another produced a needle. She felt the sharp sting in her neck, and the world began to blur. But before the darkness could take her completely, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Gunshots. The hands holding her suddenly released, and she crumpled to the ground. Through her fading vision, she saw a figure stride into the alley like an avenging angel. A dark coat billowed behind him, and in each hand, he held a gun that barked fire and death. The 3 men fell, one by one. Then he was kneeling beside her, and she found herself staring into those impossible dark eyes. "You again," she whispered, the drugs pulling her under. "Me again," Kang Jae-hyun replied. Then the world went black. Petra woke to silk sheets and the smell of rain. She bolted upright, her heart hammering, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar room. It was massive, decorated in shades of gray and black, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering Seoul skyline. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace, and soft classical music played from hidden speakers. "You're awake." She whipped her head around. Kang Jae-hyun sat in an armchair near the window, watching her with an unreadable expression. He had shed his coat and jacket, and his white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a sliver of skin that made her mouth go dry. "Where am I?" she demanded, clutching the sheets to her chest. "What did you do to me?" "I saved your life." His voice was flat. "Again. A simple thank you would suffice." "Thank you for kidnapping me." "I didn't kidnap you. I brought you somewhere safe." He rose from his chair and walked toward her, each step measured and deliberate. "Those men who attacked you work for Park Sung-ho. He's the head of a rival organization. He saw you get into my car that night and made certain assumptions." "What kind of assumptions?" "That you're important to me." He stopped at the foot of the bed, his gaze burning into hers. "That you know things you shouldn't know. That killing you would send me a message." Petra's stomach churned. "But I don't know anything." "I know that. You know that. But Park Sung-ho doesn't care about the truth. He cares about power. And right now, he thinks you're a weakness he can exploit." She stared at him, her mind racing. "So what happens now? You kill me yourself?" Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or amusement. If I wanted you dead, you would already be dead. No, Miss Daniel. You're going to stay here until I deal with Park Sung-ho. Then you'll be free to go back to your studies and your grandmother's goats. You know my name? I know everything about you. He reached into his pocket and produced a thin file. Petra Daniel, 23, from Lagos, Nigeria. Full scholarship to Seoul National University, medical program. Parents deceased, raised by your grandmother. You work 2 jobs to send money home. You haven't bought new clothes in 8 months. Your favorite food is jollof rice, and you cry every time you video call your grandmother. Her face burned with humiliation and rage. You had me investigated? Of course. You entered my world, Miss Daniel. I needed to know if you were a threat. And what did you decide? He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his eyes. Something almost vulnerable. I decided that you're the most dangerous thing I've ever encountered. Before she could respond, he turned and walked toward the door. My men will bring you food and clothes. Don't try to leave. The building is heavily guarded, and the streets are far more dangerous for you now than these walls. He paused at the threshold, his back still to her. One more thing, Miss Daniel. What? My name is Jae-hyun. You should use it. Then he was gone, and Petra was left alone with her racing heart and the terrifying realization that she was trapped in the lair of a monster. A beautiful, complicated, inexplicable monster. The days that followed were the strangest of Petra's life. True to his word, Jae-hyun provided everything she needed. Clothes appeared in the closet, all her exact size, all tasteful and expensive. Food arrived 3 times a day, and when she mentioned craving jollof rice, it appeared at dinner, cooked so perfectly that tears pricked her eyes. But she was still a prisoner. The penthouse was vast and luxurious, but she couldn't leave. Guards stood at every exit, polite but immovable. Her phone had been destroyed in the attack, and Jae-hyun refused to give her a new one. You'll contact your grandmother when it's safe, he said during one of their increasingly frequent conversations. Not before. She'll worry. She'll worry more if you're dead. Petra hated that he was right. What she hated more was how much she was starting to not hate him. Jae-hyun was cold and arrogant and infuriating. But he was also brilliant and surprisingly funny when he let his guard down. He spoke 5 languages fluently and played the piano like a virtuoso. He had a scar on his left hand from protecting his mother from his father's violence, and another on his chest from the bullet that had killed his older brother. He told her these things late at night, when the fire burned low and the city sparkled below them like a sea of stars. He spoke like a man confessing to a priest, like she was the first person he had ever trusted with the broken pieces of his soul. My father built this empire on blood, he said one night, his voice rough with something she couldn't name. He was a monster. Cruel and ruthless. He killed my mother when she tried to leave. He killed my brother when he tried to protect her. Petra's heart ached. I'm sorry. Don't be. I killed him. He said it without emotion, like he was discussing the weather. I put a bullet in his head and took everything he had built. I made it mine. I told myself I would be different. That I would have rules, codes. That I would never hurt innocents. And have you? He turned to look at her, and she saw the answer in his eyes. The weight of every terrible thing he had done. The blood that would never wash off his hands. I've tried, he said quietly. But this world doesn't allow for saints. She should have been horrified. She should have been disgusted. But all she felt was an overwhelming urge to reach out and touch him, to smooth the lines of pain from his face. My grandmother has a saying, she said softly. She says that God doesn't call the perfect. He calls the willing. Maybe you can't undo what you've done. But you can choose what you do next. Jae-hyun stared at her like she had spoken in tongues. Like she had offered him salvation he didn't deserve. Why aren't you afraid of me, he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe I should be. But when I look at you, I don't see a monster. I see a man who's been carrying too much weight for too long. The air between them crackled with electricity. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, and she forgot to breathe. Then he pulled back, his expression shuddering. Go to sleep, Miss Daniel. Petra, she corrected. If you're Jae-hyun, I'm Petra. Something softened in his eyes. Petra. Go to sleep. She did, but she dreamed of dark eyes and broken souls and a love that could never be. A week later, the first attack came. Petra was in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast, when the windows exploded inward. She screamed as glass rained down, and then arms were around her, dragging her to the floor as gunfire erupted through the penthouse. Stay down. Jae-hyun's voice was ice and steel. He was on top of her, shielding her with his body, and she could feel his heart pounding against her back. What's happening? Park Sung-ho. He found us. Jae-hyun pulled a gun from somewhere and fired back at the attackers. Listen to me carefully. There's a panic room behind the bookshelf in my study. The code is 0-8-1-5. I need you to run there and lock yourself inside. Do you understand? I'm not leaving you. He grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. In his eyes, she saw something she had never seen before. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. If something happens to you, none of this matters, he said fiercely. I can't lose you, Petra. I can't. Before she could respond, he kissed her. It was fierce and desperate and over too quickly. He pulled back, his eyes blazing. Run. She ran. She made it to the study and punched in the code with shaking fingers. The bookshelf swung open to reveal a small, reinforced room. She threw herself inside and slammed it shut. Then she waited. The sounds of battle were muffled through the thick walls, but she could still hear the gunshots, the shouts, the terrible silence that followed. She pressed her hands over her ears and prayed to every god she had ever known. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time had lost all meaning. Then the door opened, and Jae-hyun stood there, bleeding from a wound in his shoulder, his face pale but triumphant. It's over, he said. Petra launched herself at him, not caring about the blood, not caring about anything except the fact that he was alive. You idiot, she sobbed against his chest. You absolute idiot. You could have died. His arms came around her, tight and warm and safe. I told you, he murmured into her hair. I can't lose you. She pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. Why? She demanded. Why do you care so much? I'm nobody. I'm just a poor student who got into the wrong car. You're not nobody. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. You're the first person who ever looked at me and saw something other than a monster. You're the first person who made me believe I could be something more. You're everything, Petra. Everything. And then he kissed her again, and this time, she kissed him back. If you are still watching, drop a comment right now telling me your thoughts on this story. Don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends who love a good love story. Now let's continue, because things are about to get even more intense. The days after the attack were a blur of healing and revelation. Jae-hyun's wound was treated by a private doctor who asked no questions. Park Sung-ho had escaped, but his forces had been decimated. It would take him months to recover, if he recovered at all. We have time, Jae-hyun told her. Time to plan. Time to finish this. But Petra was tired of thinking about enemies and danger. She was tired of pretending she didn't feel what she felt. They stood on the balcony that night, the city spread out beneath them like a carpet of lights. Jae-hyun's arm was in a sling, but he stood close to her, his good hand resting on the small of her back. What happens when this is over? She asked quietly. What do you mean? When Park Sung-ho is dealt with. When I'm safe again. What happens to us? He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. You'll go back to your life. Your studies. Your dreams. You'll become the doctor your grandmother sacrificed everything for. And I'll go back to my world. And we'll just forget each other. He turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes stole her breath. I'll never forget you, he said. You're burned into my soul, Petra. You've ruined me for anyone else. But I won't drag you into this darkness. You deserve sunlight. You deserve happiness. You deserve everything I can never give you. What if I don't want what you think I deserve? What if I just want you? You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. She stepped closer, eliminating the distance between them. I know who you are, Jae-hyun. I've seen the worst of you, and I've seen the best. And I'm standing here anyway. Doesn't that tell you something? It tells me you're too good for your own good. Then let me be too good for you. She reached up and touched his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. Let me be the light in your darkness. Let me be yours. Petra. I love you, Jae-hyun. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and powerful. He closed his eyes, and she saw his control shatter. When he opened them again, they were blazing with an intensity that made her knees weak. I've been fighting this since the moment you fell into my car, he confessed. I told myself you were just an inconvenience. A problem to be solved. But you got under my skin. You invaded my thoughts. I found myself listening for your voice, looking for your smile, counting the minutes until I could see you again. He pulled her against him with his good arm, his forehead resting against hers. I love you, he breathed. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you so much that I would burn the world to keep you safe. I love you so much that I can't breathe when you're not near me. Their lips met, and the world fell away. This kiss was different from the others. It was slow and deep and filled with promise. It was a vow and a prayer and a claiming all at once. His hand tangled in her braids, tilting her head to deepen the kiss, and she melted into him like she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he looked at her with wonder in his eyes. Stay with me tonight, he said. Not because you have to. Because you want to. I want to, she whispered. He led her inside, and the door closed behind them. What followed was a revelation. Jae-hyun was gentle despite his injured shoulder, his hands and mouth mapping every inch of her skin like she was precious, like she was sacred. He whispered her name like a prayer, and she answered with sighs and moans and confessions of love. They came together slowly, savoring each moment, each sensation. She had never known it could be like this perfect fusion of body and soul. She had never known she could feel so complete. Afterward, they lay tangled together, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. I never thought I would have this, he admitted quietly. I never thought I deserved it. Maybe you don't, she teased gently. But you have it anyway. So don't waste it. He laughed, a real laugh that transformed his face and made her heart soar. Yes, ma'am. She fell asleep smiling, wrapped in the arms of a man who had become her whole world. But happiness, she would soon learn, always came with a price. The price arrived 3 days later in the form of a woman. Her name was Seo Yuna, and she was beautiful in the way that expensive things were beautiful. Cold and perfect and untouchable. She walked into the penthouse like she owned it, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her red lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Jae-hyun, she purred, draping herself over him like a silk scarf. I heard about the attack. I came as soon as I could. Petra stood frozen in the doorway, watching as this stunning woman pressed her body against the man she loved. Jae-hyun disentangled himself firmly, putting distance between them. Yuna. I wasn't expecting you. I wanted to surprise you. Her eyes slid to Petra, assessing and dismissing in a single glance. Who's this? New staff. This is Petra, Jae-hyun said evenly. She's a guest. A guest. Yuna's smile sharpened. How lovely. But surely you haven't forgotten our arrangement? Our families have had an understanding for years. There is no arrangement, Yuna. There never was. That's not what your mother said before she died. Or have you forgotten her dying wish? That you would marry me and unite our families? Petra's blood ran cold. She looked at Jae-hyun, waiting for him to deny it. He didn't. My mother wanted many things, he said carefully. But I make my own choices. Do you? Yuna stepped closer to Petra, her gaze predatory. Let me guess. Poor. Foreign. A scholarship student, perhaps? How exotic. But surely you know that a man like Jae-hyun could never truly be with someone like you. You're a distraction. A toy. When he's finished playing, he'll come back to where he belongs. That's enough, Yuna. Is it? She turned back to Jae-hyun, her mask slipping to reveal genuine fury. I've waited years for you, Jae-hyun. I've done everything your family asked. I've looked the other way while you played with your little toys. But this? This is different. I can see it in your eyes. And I won't accept it. You don't have a choice. Oh, but I do. Yuna's smile returned, colder than ever. You forget, darling. I know all your secrets. Every body you've buried. Every deal you've made. Every sin you've committed. If you don't end this little affair and honor our arrangement, I'll make sure the whole world knows exactly who Kang Jae-hyun really is. The temperature in the room dropped. Jae-hyun's expression went blank in a way that made Petra's heart stop. Are you threatening me, Yuna? I'm reminding you of your place. She gathered her coat and headed for the door. You have 1 week to get rid of her. If she's still here after that, I'll make you both regret it. The door slammed behind her. Petra stood in the silence, her mind reeling. She looked at Jae-hyun, searching for answers, for reassurance, for anything. Is it true? She asked quietly. Was your mother's dying wish for you to marry her? My mother was drugged and delirious when she said those words. Yuna's family fed her lies to manipulate the situation. But there was an understanding? An arrangement? There was an expectation. He moved toward her, his expression pained. One I never agreed to. One I've spent years trying to untangle myself from. Petra, you have to believe me. Yuna means nothing to me. She knows your secrets. She could destroy you. Let her try. No. Petra shook her head, tears burning in her eyes. I won't let you sacrifice everything for me. I won't let you. This is my choice. He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. I choose you. I will always choose you. Nothing Yuna threatens, nothing Park Sung-ho does, nothing in heaven or hell will change that. Do you understand? She wanted to believe him. She wanted to so badly. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it would soon grow into something terrible. 2 days later, Petra made a decision. She waited until Jae-hyun left for a meeting, then slipped out of the penthouse. The guards tried to stop her, but she was resourceful, using the service elevator and a stolen uniform to make her escape. She didn't run because she didn't love him. She ran because she loved him too much. If staying meant his destruction, then she had to go. She had to remove herself from the equation. Maybe then, Yuna would back off. Maybe then, Jae-hyun could make peace with his world. She made it to a bus station before they found her. Not Jae-hyun's men. Park Sung-ho's. They came out of nowhere, dragging her into a van before she could scream. A hood was thrown over her head, and she felt the familiar sting of a needle in her neck. Her last thought before the darkness took her was of Jae-hyun's face. I'm sorry, she thought. I'm so sorry. She woke in chains. The room was damp and cold, lit by a single bare bulb that swung from the ceiling. Her wrists were shackled to a pipe above her head, her shoulders screaming in protest. And Park Sung-ho stood before her, smiling like a cat that had caught a particularly delicious mouse. He was older than she had expected, with gray at his temples and a scar that ran from his eyebrow to his chin. His eyes were empty, devoid of humanity. Looking into them was like looking into the void. "So you're the woman who has captivated Kang Jae-hyun," he said, circling her slowly. "I must admit, I expected something more impressive." Petra said nothing. Her grandmother had taught her that when you had nothing useful to say, silence was the strongest weapon. "Do you know why you're here?" Still she said nothing. Park Sung-ho's smile faltered. He grabbed her face, his fingers digging into her cheeks. "I asked you a question. And I chose not to answer." Her voice came out steady despite her terror. "If you're going to kill me, do it. But I won't give you the satisfaction of seeing me beg." Something flickered in his empty eyes. Respect, maybe. Or curiosity. "Perhaps I misjudged you." He released her face and stepped back. "Killing you would be a waste. You're far more valuable alive. Jae-hyun has gone to war for you. He's killed dozens of my men. He's destroyed properties worth millions. All for a poor Nigerian student." He leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear. "Imagine what he'll do when I send him your finger. Or your ear. Or perhaps something more intimate." Petra's blood ran cold, but she refused to show fear. "He'll kill you. That's what he'll do. He'll try." Park Sung-ho straightened, still smiling. "But by the time he finds you, it will be too late. For both of you." He turned and walked to the door, pausing at the threshold. "Make yourself comfortable, Miss Daniel. You're going to be here for a while." The door slammed shut, and Petra was alone with her fear and her chains and her prayers. Jae-hyun would come for her. She knew he would. She just had to survive long enough for him to find her. The hours bled together, marked only by the flickering of the light and the distant sounds of footsteps and voices. They gave her water but no food. They asked her questions about Jae-hyun's operations, his safe houses, his weaknesses. She answered none of them. On what she guessed was the second day, they brought out the knife. She screamed then. She couldn't help it. The pain was like nothing she had ever experienced, white-hot and blinding. But even as the blood ran down her arm, even as Park Sung-ho laughed and his men filmed it all, she refused to break. "I am Petra Daniel," she told herself. "My grandmother sold 12 goats to give me a future. I will not die here. I will not." Then, on the third day, the building exploded. One moment, she was hanging from her chains, barely conscious. The next, the wall behind her burst inward, and men poured through the gap like avenging angels. Gunfire erupted. Bodies fell. And through the smoke and chaos, she saw him. Jae-hyun. He was covered in blood, none of it his own. His face was a mask of cold fury, his movements precise and deadly as he cut through Park Sung-ho's men like a blade through paper. He reached her in seconds, his hands gentle despite the violence that surrounded them. "Petra." His voice broke on her name. "I'm here. I've got you." He shattered her chains with a single shot and caught her as she fell. She clung to him, sobbing, her injured arm screaming in pain. "You came," she whispered. "I will always come for you." He pressed his forehead to hers, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Always." Then he lifted her in his arms and carried her out of hell. The aftermath was chaos and cleanup and consequences. Park Sung-ho had been captured in the raid, and Jae-hyun dealt with him personally. Petra didn't ask for details. She didn't want to know. All that mattered was that the threat was finally, permanently eliminated. Yuna was dealt with too. Her threats meant nothing when Jae-hyun produced evidence of her family's own crimes, evidence he had been quietly gathering for years. She fled Korea in disgrace, never to return. Petra's arm healed, though it would always bear a scar. Jae-hyun kissed that scar every night, as if trying to take the pain into himself. "I should have protected you better," he said one night, his voice heavy with guilt. "You couldn't have known I would run. You ran because of me. Because of my world. Because I dragged you into something you never asked for." "No." She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "I ran because I was afraid. Afraid that loving you would cost you everything. But I was wrong. Running almost cost me you. And that would have been the true tragedy." He pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. "I can't change what I am," he said quietly. "I've done terrible things. I'll probably do more. But I swear to you, Petra, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you see when you look at me. The man you deserve. You already are." She kissed him softly. "You already are." 6 months later, they stood on a beach in Lagos. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The sound of waves filled the air, mixing with the distant beat of drums and the laughter of children. And before them, surrounded by her 12 new goats, stood Petra's grandmother. Mama Daniel was small and fierce, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had flown from their village for the first time in her life, dressed in her best Ankara, to meet the man who had stolen her granddaughter's heart. She studied Jaehyun for a long moment, her gaze piercing. "So you are the one," she said in Yoruba. "The one whom my Petra has chosen." "Yes, Ma." Jaehyun's Korean accent made the words clumsy, but he had practiced for weeks. "I love your granddaughter. I want to spend my life with her." "And what do you offer her? Money? Power?" "I offer her my heart." He reached for Petra's hand, lacing their fingers together. "My protection. My devotion. Everything I am and everything I have. If she'll have me." Petra's grandmother was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her weathered face. "She will have you," she said. "Because she is my granddaughter, and she has my stubbornness. But know this, Korean man. If you ever hurt her, I will come for you myself. And these old hands have strangled more than one foolish man in my time." Jaehyun bowed deeply. "I don't doubt it, Mama." Petra laughed, tears streaming down her face. She threw her arms around her grandmother, breathing in the familiar scent of home and love and belonging. "Thank you, Mama." "For what?" "For approving of your criminal boyfriend? For believing in me. For the goats. For everything." Her grandmother held her close. "You are my heart, Petra. You have always been my heart. I just want you to be happy." "I am." Petra looked at Jaehyun, who was being enthusiastically sniffed by the goats, his dignified composure completely abandoned. "I really am." 3 years later, Dr. Petra Daniel Kang walked across the stage to receive her medical degree. In the audience, Kang Jaehyun rose to his feet, applauding so loudly that the people around him stared. Beside him, Mama Daniel wept with joy, clutching a photograph of the goats she had sold to make this moment possible. And in Petra's arms, wrapped in a blanket of the softest Korean silk, their daughter slept peacefully, unaware that her mother had just made history. Later that night, in their home overlooking the Seoul skyline, Jaehyun pulled Petra close. "Dr. Kang," he murmured against her hair. "It suits you. I worked hard for it. You work hard for everything." He kissed her temple. "It's one of the many things I love about you." She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had changed her life. The man who had once terrified her, who had saved her, who had loved her through darkness and light. "Tell me again," she whispered. He knew what she wanted. He always knew. "I love you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you more than I ever thought possible. I love you more than my own life. I love you more than the empire I built and the power I wield and every breath in my body. You are my heart, Petra. You are my home. You are the reason I believe in redemption." She kissed him then, pouring all her love into the gesture. You know, she said when they finally broke apart, my grandmother says our story is better than any Nigerian movie. High praise. The highest. She grinned. She also says we should give her more grandchildren. Does she now? His eyes darkened with familiar heat. Perhaps we should get started on that. Petra laughed as he lifted her into his arms and carried her toward their bedroom. Outside, the city sparkled with a million lights. Inside, two hearts that had found each other against all odds beat as one. And somewhere in a small village in Lagos, 12 goats grazed peacefully under the stars, the beginning of a love story that would be told for generations. If you made it to the end of this story, you are a true ride-or-die viewer and I appreciate you so much. Please smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me what you thought of Petra and Jaehyun's love story. Should I make a part 2? Let me know. And don't forget to share this video with your friends who love a good romance with drama, action, and happily ever after. Until next time, stay blessed, stay beautiful, and keep believing in love.